certainly tremendous success in the southwestern part of the state. The first well in the Marcellus that was horizontally drilled and fractured in Washington County was just a few years ago. We've had an awful lot of activity up in the northeastern part of the state, Bradford County and those surrounding counties. And you're beginning to see the connection of the dots between those two. So the shale is here, and we will be doing drilling to really test that out to see if it's going to be commercial. But we're very positive it will be, but there will be areas that are of better quality than others.
I know one area of concern, and this has been in the news lately, when you brought up horizontal drilling. I know there are residents, landowners that are quite concerned that they'll have no say-so in the process whatsoever. Maybe you can address this. Do you think it's going to get a little bit ugly? And I don't mean just fighting over money, because when we start talking about money, people start to fight over it. But fight over whether or not there's going to be invasive things happening. I'm a landowner. I'm sitting here. You come to me, I say, no, just leave my property alone. I don't want anybody drilling on my property or near my property. But we're hearing that we can sink a well as far away as an acre or two, or maybe more, I don't know. Go down, come into my property and get my natural gas anyway. Is that going to affect me? Should I be concerned about that?
Well, first of all, an oil and gas company cannot do that without owning or having a lease on the oil and gas on that property. So if you own your oil and gas and you do not want the property drilled, then that will not occur. So, and really, we're talking about if you did get permission. I think your second question is, should you be concerned? If those rights have already been given to an oil and gas company, we are talking about horizontally drilling at a depth of 7,500 feet, much deeper than surface, much deeper than the freshwater aquifer. I was personally involved in the drilling of a horizontal well in West Virginia in 1990. The horizontal fracturing technology is 60 years old. My company still produces wells. It was one of the first wells hydraulically fractured. So really this is a combination of two very mature technologies that have been combined now to unleash the gas in the shale. But it's something that really can be done safely as long as the operator, the oil and gas company, and the service companies involved pay attention to the plans that Barry referred to. We have to do it right.
And I think that kind of leads me to my next question as well. As a company, Consol, who's been in the business a long time, leading coal producer, and now you guys know a lot about extraction. What have you learned from the early days to now? What have you learned to make it more safe and not as evasive or not as how can I say, as damaging to the environment visually as maybe it used to be years ago? We would see coal, like John said, I don't think anybody really cared about anything back then. There were many less rules and regulations than there are now. But what have you guys learned as far as extraction is concerned, coal versus natural gas?
Well, my experience has been solely natural gas, so I can speak to that. But the sites are now designed by a professional engineer. They will be reclaimed back as close as possible to contour when they're done. There will be no high walls or anything like that that may not be attractive. We will put them back. We immediately reseed whatever is put back in place. There are items like silt sock, which is used to collect sediment so that we don't have erosion into streams. We've learned a lot about proper erosion and sedimentation controls to avoid those type issues. We spoke a little earlier about proper cementing techniques and some changes in the law to where more strings of casing are now required. But there are companies like Consol who chose to run those extra strings of casing voluntarily. And really what came out of the state was a review of best practices of what companies were already doing, were working, and they just made that a standard for the state for all operators.
Craig, you mentioned how deep these Marcellus wells are, how deep you have to go. If you could maybe, and again, it was, we were talking with Perry earlier about the education process, I think is one of the most important things. You guys know what you're doing. You know what the industry is all about. You know what benefits we're going to get out of natural gas in Marcellus in this area. But again, the residents and people of Indiana County and all over Pennsylvania, it's a learning process for us. We're being educated. We don't know completely about this whole new thing. It's brand new. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the extraction of natural gas, and specifically Marcellus here, is different from conventional oil and gas reservoirs. What is the difference? Not quite as deep. Want to handle that, Perry?
The Marcellus in the Northeast, as Craig said, typically runs 6,000 to 7,500 feet. If you look at the traditional wells that have been drilled in Pennsylvania, they're more in the 3,000 to 5,000 foot range. But the 6,000 to 7,500 range is not out of the ordinary in other parts of the country. Much of the shales that are very similar to the Marcellus in the Bakken, in the Haynesville, or in Eagle Ford in South Texas, they're in the 10 to 14,000 foot range. So a lot of the processes and techniques that were used to drill those wells are now being brought here. The big differentiator with horizontal technology is when you drilled a vertical well, if you had a section of rock that was 30 foot thick, you could only collect gas from that 30-foot section and how far you could hydraulically fracture out. Now if you drill a lateral that's 6,000 feet long, you're exposing yourself to a lot more rock. That's what's making the Marcellus and shales economic. Horizontal drilling has changed the game in the U.S. Without this technology and without hydraulic fracturing, you can't produce this. 99% of the wells in the U.S. must be fracked, and 99% of shale wells are only going to be economical at current prices horizontal. So technology is what's changed the game. In the last 10 to 15 years. As Craig said, we've been drilling horizontal wells for 20 years, but we've really only been in the last 5 to 8 years we've really refined the technology.
And the fracturing process, can you describe for us folks that don't entirely understand it? We hear bits and pieces of it. Some people have described the process. Of course, we hear the possible environmental or damage side of the fracturing process. Probably the one single most thing that people are concerned about is that the fracturing process itself is going to cause the pollution in our water or in my drinking water or to the environment itself. Can you describe how that fracturing process works, how deep it is, and the safety of it?
The hydraulic fracturing process takes place in the horizontal section, so it's going to be at a depth of 6,000 to 7,500 feet. As Craig said, if the casing points are all ran and properly cemented, there has never been a case known of hydraulic fracturing fluid coming to the surface and or contaminating fresh water. The hydraulic fracturing process works by using pumps that pump water and sand, and then a limited number of chemicals that allow you to bring the gas back to the surface. It's not a new process. It's been done in the U.S. for 60 years. And as I said, 99% of the wells in the U.S. require hydraulic fracturing. I guess probably the biggest thing out in the industry that people hear about is the amount of water that's used. And that causes some concern. But the process itself is proven. It's been proven to be safe. We just all, as an industry and as a service industry, need to hold each other accountable to follow all the processes. And as long as we do that, it is perfectly safe.
John Pina, at the end of the table there. John, you're a longtime industry expert. You know a lot about fracturing, a lot about the Marcellus. These concerns that people have about the fracturing process, their drinking water possibly getting polluted, is this well-founded, or do we not have anything really to worry about?
Well, my opinion is based on having an environmental and geology background, and one of the methods of disposing of waste, primarily radioactive, has been deep well injection, mainly in the western states, Arizona, Nevada. Again, the aquifers where we get